This week on Gymwright Live, we interview Rick Alexander to learn about the art of teamwork dynamics. Check it out. Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Gymwright Live. I'm your host, Marcus Gurzy, and with me today we have Rick Alexander. He is a very decorated individual with a lot going on in not just in business, but this man has been in the special operations community for 10 years. He is an endurance coach, an author of a brand new book that's out on Amazon now, Burn Your Couch. And he's going to be talking to us today about some teamwork dynamics and all sorts of good stuff that you can implement at your gym. Rick, welcome to the show, my man. How are you doing?
I'm well. Thanks for having me on.
Pleasure to have you on. And you have a lot to you, so I'm going to pass the mic to you because I don't want to butcher your background and all the wonderful things you have going on. What is your story, man? What brought you here today? And tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, it is a lot going on. So about 10 years ago is when I joined the military. Like most kids, just trying to get out of their hometown, kind of wanted to do something more, and everyone sort of has their reason for joining. But I went through a special operations selection program, was selected and spent 5 to 6 years at the teams and just really was head down doing the job. And then I got an opportunity to actually come be an instructor and select for the people that we were looking for. And this was an interesting process because you really take your head out of being an operator, and now you're trying to figure out why it was that you got selected and then how you can find more of those people.
Right.
And so I went to become a BUDS instructor. For those that don't know, it's a basic underwater demolition SEAL school. And any kind of naval special warfare all go through the beginning part of BUDS together. So that's Navy SEAL, Navy SWCC. They all go through a combined orientation program. And that was cool as well because I got to see about 1,000 kids a year for 4 years.
Wow.
We put through what you could describe as the most rigorous kind of hiring process imaginable. And in that process, I actually had started my own business on the side, which you mentioned. I host a podcast. At the time, I had a supplement company, which I'm sort of stepping away from now. But it was interesting because I could see on the military side how we were selecting these people that the rest of the world looked up to, and that we had such a fine-tuned process. And at the same time, I would be hiring for my companies on the side, and I could not seem to replicate it, which kind of caused me to start looking at both of those things and trying to see what I could pull from the military and what I could pull from civilian. And I know when you're a gym owner, there's a lot of gym owners that are actually in the military, and one of the first things you realize is that everything doesn't transfer, but a lot of things do, right? And so I really got deep into that process over the course of those 4 years. So I'm excited to share that stuff with you guys today.
Awesome, man. Thank you so much for being on the show. Today we're going to talk about teamwork from a special operations perspective and building camaraderie, getting your team to be mission-oriented in order to facilitate motivation, and really to drill down on how to select the right employee using the special warfare model. I know you have a unique approach to that. What is that? It's called the whole man concept?
Yeah, the whole man concept. That's what we used at the schoolhouse, and that was kind of a directive that came from higher. And essentially, we wanted to look at how we were selecting guys and then the criteria that we were selecting them for. And that's actually the thing that I realized had the most application to the civilian world.
Awesome, man. So as a gym owner, why should a gym owner care about this?
Well, essentially, like if I've spent a lot of time in a lot of different gyms on both coasts of the United States and actually around the world. And what I've come to realize is there's always maybe one or two coaches that just don't quite fit the culture. And that's an interesting dynamic because they either bring members with them and then those members stop kind of fitting the culture, or they're sort of the black sheep. And I feel like I've seen it both ways. And I think that's because as a business owner, when you go to hire, you're not looking at maybe the criteria that's going to fit your culture as much as you're looking for more of the hard skills. Like, is he a level 2? Did I get along with him? Or maybe you don't even care about that at the moment if you're in a pinch and you just want to hire an instructor. And I see that a lot, and I think that it comes down to not being able to pick somebody that fits your culture.
Yeah, I think a lot of gym owners find themselves in a position where they just are hiring someone just because someone's willing and capable enough to take it on.
For sure.
Probably more than anything. And unfortunately, this is such a, this business is built on your coaches and the experience that your members have with them, right? That's, at the end of the day, the coaches are your product. So it's super important to make sure that you're choosing people who are not just technically sound, but are that cultural fit and someone who's going to be a good soldier on your team, right? So oftentimes you find these teams that are just so disconnected, and then the gym owner's wondering why they're struggling to get buy-in from people, or why there's these like subgroups developing within their community. So I'm really eager to explore this with you, because if someone can take a more proactive control in how they're bringing people in, I think it would be an immense benefit to everybody, really. So cool. So I'm a gym owner. I am wanting to build a better team. Where do I begin?
So I think we need to start higher. So one of the things that I higher up in the kind of food chain is what I mean. So when I started, I took the model that you took, right? I hired somebody that was kind of willing, didn't have any crazy mark against them. And I assumed that everybody knew the culture that I wanted to build in my head. And that was an advantage that the military has, because the culture is so instilled, right? And so everybody's, we'll call it everybody's why. Like, it's a very deep-seated culture. They, start with why. Literally, Simon Sinek started with all of the military using that model. But anyway, so what I think is interesting is we as business owners in the civilian world, I think we don't start with the culture. And if we don't start with the culture, if we don't make that part really apparent to everybody else around us, then there's almost no way that we're going to be able to hire people, and they're going to know what it is we're looking for. And we're not, it's like a chicken or the egg thing, but I think you got to start with the culture before you start with the employee.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. Or else what are you preaching? What are they buying into? There's nothing to buy into. It's now just a job, rather than they're buying into a bigger movement. And I think a lot of gym owners struggle even with understanding what their vision is, right? It's like, well, I want to make everybody fit. I want to make this available to everyone. But I think them really distilling down their purpose for being in business, the impact they're trying to make, and exactly who it is that they're trying to serve and can serve best, then saying, okay, well, now that we have the vision clarified, what does the culture mean? What does it mean for someone to be a member of this team, a member of this community, a leader in this community, so that they have a starting point, or else there's nothing to start with, right?
Yeah, I agree completely. And I think that it needs to be, I think a lot of times when we start thinking about our why, we have a tendency to go really altruistic with it. And we want it to be very, I think a lot of times we want to start with a why that we think it should be instead of what we actually want it to be. So we say something like, I want the greater San Diego area to be more fit, or something like that, or healthier, right? Or whatever your altruistic notion is. But I think that people need to be super honest with what they want to build. Like, what was the exact reason that when you think about your gym, if everything were to go right 5 years down the road, what would that look like? And that's a super important thing that I don't think we put in. Do you want to build a games team? Like, is that your thing? Because a lot of times that is people's thing. And then what happens is they don't bring that up, and they end up build a huge divide within the culture of their gym, because not everybody wants to go to the games.
Yeah, that's people are like, oh, we need a mission statement. They Google, how to write a mission statement, and they copy and paste 80% of what's already there, fill in some blanks. Like, there you go, put it on the wall. That's our culture. That's our mission. It's like, oh, make it your own. It has to be something specific, and it has to be specific to you.
You're not going to be able to build it if it's not. That's the problem.
Exactly right. There's nothing to follow. Okay, so we get an idea of what the culture is that we're even going to be enforcing, or we're trying to build, for that matter. What's the next step?
So this is interesting. So we can talk about the whole man concept and sort of the way that we could select for people like that. But one of the things I do is, that's why I said, if everything were to go right for you right now, what would this business look like to you in 5 years? Mm-hmm. How much are you working in it? What kind of athletes are you creating? Get as specific as you can on every single metric that you can. And then one of the most powerful questions that I've come to find is, I always ask people that I hire, like, okay, so if this doesn't end up working out and you don't end up working here, 5 years later, if I run into you at an airport and I say, how's life going? And you say, everything is completely perfect, how I want it to be, how I've always dreamt it would be. What does that look like for you? And because then they're talking about what their perfect is, and you can see if it's anywhere near what yours is or if these things don't align at all.
Right. Very good. Yeah. And it's going to expose to what they actually want. Right.
Right. A lot of times they're like, oh yeah, I came upon a big sum of money and I'm not working anymore. You know what I mean? And it's like, perfect. So you don't want to work for a living.
Yeah. We do something similar with our new gym owner clients here that begin our foundations program, where we go through some vision clarification exercises. And sometimes, and this actually just happened very recently, where the gym owner's vision of their perfect day and their really what the grand scheme of their life is, and it was very similar. Not even that far down the road, the gym had nothing to do with it. And that is always a red flag. And it's like, well, is this, why are you doing this? Well, it was just an opportune thing to do. It's like, okay, so now we're getting to the truth of why a lot of these challenges exist in your business is because you're not even bought into this, right? You're not really even willing to go all the way in because you already know the runway is super short. You're already kind of checked out. You've got that senioritis kicking in about like, well, how much longer am I going to stick this thing out? And that's why all of these challenges exist. So, yeah, it's an interesting exercise. So we get an idea of where this person wants to go longer term. Now what do we do?
Well, I mean, I think what you're looking for are values, right? And you want their values and your values to be aligned. And I think that a lot of times when we're crafting out our perfect future or plan for the business in the future, we don't start with values. And I think that that's probably the most important thing because, again, like if those aren't aligned, if you're just running off what you think you should be doing and not what you actually really deep down want, then I think that's just going to, your subconscious is going to keep self-sabotaging. And, that kind of sounds a little woo-woo, but I've seen it so many times 100%. With my own life and others.
100%. All right. So, and I know you have a whole system for how you actually approach the whole man concept.
That's right.
And you've got an x-axis, y-axis. Can you kind of explain the whole system, if you will? And then kind of we can get into kind of how you would lay this out and then walk someone through the process of actually like kind of interviewing someone, I believe is the system, right?
Right. And so you would want to craft interviews, questions that are going to lead you toward being able to fill this thing out, right? But I think a lot of times what we don't do is when we talk to somebody, we don't quantify EIQ because it's hard. Emotional IQ is a hard thing to quantify. Sure. So it's kind of like, do we like them? Do we not like them? Are we indifferent and they have a level 2? Perfect. Right. And that's what happens a lot. So I think that that's why I think that's the power in this system. So hopefully, ideally, you're interviewing multiple people, and that's the only time that this would really matter. But if you were to look at a bar graph with a y-axis and a x-axis, essentially, if you were to put hard skills on the y and you were to put soft skills on the x, and again, now these soft skills, they need to be aligned with your values, which is why it's so important to know those. So do you care about integrity? Do you care about sales? What kind of things do you care about? And what do you need? What is the role that you need them to be able to fulfill in your business, right? And as you come up with these metrics for hard skills and then the soft skills, you're able to just plot it on that graph, right? So you're going to go up 3 boxes for hard skills like CrossFit level 1, 2, weightlifting, whatever it is that you are caring about. Right. And then you're going to go over for the soft skills that they have. And then you're going to be able to give them an average and you're going to be able to plot them. And now when you do that, when you go over and over in your interviews, so I remember we went through about 10 interviews for the sales position. And then when you look through the graph, it was like, it's very clear, okay, this person has the exact mix of hard skills and soft skills that we're looking for. And she ranks above everybody else. And so we go with that person. Now, one of the things you have to do in that process too is decide, well, what kind of things can they be lacking that I would be okay with training? So in my opinion, hard skills are much easier to train than soft skills. Somebody that doesn't have emotional IQ, like this is self-awareness is a really hard thing to train in somebody. And quite honestly, if you're a gym owner, you probably don't have the time to help start making people self-aware. And so those are what I prioritize. And if it's $1,000 to get somebody the next CrossFit level or whatever it is that you're hiring for on the hard skill side, then that's something I would do because somebody with a good emotional IQ that's self-aware is going to be able to handle that challenge. Whereas what we do is we focus solely on hard skills a lot of the time, and then the problems that we run into in the gym with them not fitting the culture and not not caring about our mission, and all of those things end up being soft skills. And so for me, that's why, you got to figure out what you prioritize. That's why I prioritize those things. But it gives you a really easy way to look at these people a little bit more objectively, right? And I think that sometimes we go solely subjective, or like you said, sometimes we just hire for what we're looking for. But I think having some kind of system where you can look at these people and look at where they shake out compared to the others and give yourself some space from it and then come back is actually really valuable.
Yeah, no question. I mean, being able to actually visualize these strengths and weaknesses and really be able to now compare and contrast because you're able to quantify the different skill sets is going to be huge in your decision-making process. But I think you bring up a super important point, and particularly for those who run a box and are thinking like, well, I have an idea of the different kinds of things that matter, but where do they fall in regards to priority? And I think that the soft skills and someone's personality and that, do they legitimately love helping people? Do they enjoy, being in front of people and leading people, and their communication skills and their spirit and all those things that kind of fall more into the, like, I think everyone looks at, like you said, the hard skills first. It's like, look at this guy's got 10 certifications. He's been coaching for forever, this and that. But you talk to the guy and you're like, he's kind of a dick. And yeah, I'm not getting the vibe off of this guy at all. It's like, if you're picking candidates in our business, it's like, look, it's not that difficult to send someone off to a certification or to say, you know what, for the next 3 months, I'm going to teach you how we teach the squat and our progressions. And we're going to do a little bit extra homework in that regard. But it's never a challenge of how did they show up for people? Because at the end of the day, we're in the relationship business and your people are showing up to the coach's classes, right? And if that person's attitude isn't welcoming and does not make them feel like they're an individual and that person is cared for, then you're just going to end up in the same position that most gym owners who struggle find themselves in, which is this revolving door effect. We do all this work to market and to get them in, and we work our asses off onboarding them, and then 2-3 months or maybe 4 months in, they're kind of like, indifferent, and they leave because there was no authentic personal connection. So ultimately what we're looking for are connectors, and then we can teach them the rest. So
and it's interesting because at that point then we realize nobody's going to care about our business as much as us, and that's like our scapegoat for it.
100%.
And their job's not to care about your business. Your job is to make them care about your vision, and that's where we see that disconnect, I think, a lot of times, at least in my opinion. But what brought this about, this idea of this like whole man concept, as we call it in the military, but this system, is that we selected for hard skills only for the longest time. And so when I went through training, it was like if you failed once, you were like on notice. If you failed again, that was it. You were basically out of there. Maybe you would get one role if the instructors didn't hate you, but that was it. But what we found is all these studies were coming out where people that actually retested something that didn't get it the first time, especially in shooting, would end up much better shots in the long run. And so then we were finding out like, okay, so we're selecting for something, and then they'd get to the teams, and then we were running out of. We were very bottom heavy, and people would get out because we weren't able to like progress people through their career like we would need to. And so that was just an interesting fact. It's like the fact that they don't have the hard skills, not only is it okay, but there's a good chance they're going to be better at it if they have to work at it more.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, it's in my experience in running active, we experimented with both approaches, and where we sought out someone who was technically on paper looked like a phenomenal candidate, and then bringing someone up who literally had started with us years prior. And at first it seemed, there's no way that this newbie can ever catch up to this other person. But at the end of the day, what ended up happening is that the newbie actually ended up getting better because they were constantly in that learning environment and trying to grow and progress. And culturally, we're a perfect fit. They grew up in our culture. So the drive to learn and to master our approach and to become an active coach, the way that we viewed an active coach, they actually got far better in the long run than the guy who showed up with the hard skills and was kind of stuck in his ways, and then now was never actually progressing. Like, I already know how to do that. I'll do it my way. And it's like, right there, he's done. He's dead in the water. He's not progressing anymore. When one of our core values was we're always learning. And the second you say, no, I already know that, it's like, no, maybe there's a better way to do that. Let's like open up a little
Yeah.
bit. And we actually ended up letting that guy go. And it was crazy because we thought that, I mean, he was so good technically, but when it came to the culture itself and actually progressing with the skills, because we were constantly pushing the envelope, there became a gap. And at first it was small and we made excuses for it. And after a year or so, it's like, dude, this is not going to work. And you have to make a hard decision.
Yeah, I think what's interesting is you look at the guy on paper and you think that it seems obvious that this is the guy you would want to hire. And the time that it becomes not quite so obvious is when you look at the culture of a CrossFit gym, because most people start a gym or any business actually because they think they can do it better. Mm-hmm. Like that's for sure how I knew I had to be an entrepreneur my whole life, because I can't go anywhere without thinking I can do it better. Yep. Right? And so most people start a CrossFit gym because they think that their style, the way that they can do things is actually better. And then when you look at CrossFit in particular, it's very subjective, right? Greg Glassman is very libertarian. It is there's very little barrier to entry. So what you get is a lot of different ways to do things. Mm-hmm. And you get, the Russian versus the Chinese Olympic weightlifting style. Like I've seen both of those. I've had coaches in my gym both teach differently, and people would get so frustrated because they're like, I just spent all barbell club last quarter like not jumping when I did a snatch, you know what I mean? And now you're literally telling me to jump. And so because I think it's so subjective and there's so many different ways to skin that cat, like it's actually not obvious at all that you would want to just hire for someone that knows it, because they might not know it how you do. And that's kind of the problem that you ran into, right?
Yeah, 100%. So is there anything else you wanted to add to that whole interview process and mapping out those different points and making decisions around that, or do you feel like that's been covered thoroughly?
No, I do. I think that you need to figure out as a gym owner, like I said, you will never be able to even do this process without values or whatever. But I just think having some way to think about things a little more objectively is a good idea. And then when it comes to figuring out all of the different soft skills that you care about, really there's no perfect way to do this, because you're hiring for different positions and maybe you need more sales in your gym, or maybe the sales team is on point. So your leads come in and so you really just need a coach or whatever that is. So you have to, as an owner, I think you need to figure out what those metrics are that you really prioritize. But the system itself, I think, is worth a shot.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you for sharing that system. I think that's going to be really helpful for a lot of the gym owners watching and listening. So question for you in your experience with special operations, teamwork, I think, is one of the most important things that we're trying to do well, or we need to be able to do well when we're running a gym with having a staff of people. Everyone needs to be rowing in the same direction. Do you have what do you even view teamwork as, and what makes a great team in your experience in working at such a high level with teams?
Yeah, I think teamwork is when multiple people are working together seamlessly. And I don't think that it matters what their particular positions are, and a good team comes to understand that. So with us, we're trained to do every job on the craft at all times, right? And so if somebody, in our position, if somebody were to go down or get shot or be missing or for whatever reason wasn't in place, I'm a medic, right? But I know that everybody on my team could step in and give an IV and give a tourniquet and plug a hole. And so I think thinking about that perspective, you might not be the sales guy, but do you know how to sell? Do you know how we close people here? So I think, and then having people that are open to that, because the guy that's like, look, bro, I'm an Olympic weightlifting coach, been doing it for 20 years. And it's like, right, but if somebody walks in off the street, I need you to be able to talk to them and sell them. And if they're not open to that, it's making that person be an effective member of your team is going to be extremely difficult. And so I think the biggest thing that I see with us that I don't see in the civilian world is that people have their roles and they have their jobs and they just kind of do them. And I think that's actually not the way to go about it. I think you should have your expertise, but I think that you should be open and able to step up and kind of fill whatever needs to be filled at the time.
Sure, and I think that, again, can come back to, when we're looking at the culture and the overall spirit of the people that we're bringing in and the spirit of the team. It's look, you don't have to be the best sales guy for this example, right? You don't have to be the best sales guy. I'm not going to put you in a sales contest against our sales guy, right? But if he's out sick or gets hit by a bus or someone walks in off the street, can you step up for a day or two and help out? And just having the willingness and being able to, and also having the process for you as the owner, not just relying on someone's skill set and saying, well, good, he's good at selling, just go do your thing, but actually identifying how do we sell here. Let's document that process so that not only can we make sure we can measure what that person's doing, but that we can teach this system or approach to everybody else on the team. A lot of these things just get skipped. The gym business is such a small business, and I think everyone's just kind of like, yeah, well, if everyone's just kind of doing their thing, they find this like, oh, well, everything's fine. But it's a house of cards, because now no one can replace or help out the other if anything does happen or someone doesn't show up. So that was a really good perspective, man. I appreciate that.
Yeah, and sorry.
No, go ahead.
And I think the other thing to think about, like when you're a business, I know this is how I think about my business. I don't ever want anybody to have an interaction with our business that's anything adverse to what I would want it to be. And so, that person that's on, you need to know that, can they competently talk about your gym? Like they don't need to be a great salesperson, but can they get the person that comes in off the street to talk to the talk to the salesperson? Mm-hmm. And so I think that's worth mentioning. So you're not looking for these people to be, like you said, rock stars at all of these things. You just need to know that they're on board with your values, your mission, and they can convey that to another human.
Yeah, no doubt. I had a question for you. So you just recently published Burn Your Couch, and it's a manifesto for the average averse, where you take all the lessons that you've learned in the business world as well as the military special operations world, and you've combined them. What is this book all about, man?
So I think I wrote this book the same reason that most people write a book, which is I felt like I had a book inside of me and I needed to write it. And I wrote it over the course of like 8 years, my last 8 years, and there's some wild stories in there, but essentially what I realized is, like I said, I was looking at the civilian world, I was looking at the business world, and I'm like, there are lessons that are so applicable to both, but they're not all. Like a lot of times I've seen people write these military books and they're good stories because people like war stories for whatever reason, and it's kind of catches your attention, but is it applicable to your life? And a lot of times it's not, because in the military, like I said, there's a lot of things that are a given. The culture is a given. The fact that almost everybody's going to do exactly what you tell them to do if they're under you in the chain of command is a given. That's not a given at all in the civilian world. And so what I tried to do was pick out these sort of like the sage advice that I've learned that was applicable to both things. And so the whole book is really about my successes and then a lot of my failures too, and trying to mesh those two worlds.
Awesome, man. Yeah. What was the process like in writing the book? Did you write it yourself, top to bottom? Did you work with an editor?
I did. I love writing. It's what I do. I'm writing another book right now. So, of course I worked with an editor, but yeah, I wrote the entire thing. And, for every, I'd say like 1,500 words I'd write, I'd probably get 300 that were usable. And so that process is, I just sweat over the keyboard for years, and I'm getting it down, but it's like it's something you can't force. So
awesome, man. Well, a question I like to ask every guest here on the show, in one sentence, if you could give one piece of advice to a gym owner, what would it be?
I should have had that one ready. I think you need to define what you really want for your life. And that's the book that I'm writing right now. But I just think that so many of us are sort of on autopilot. We don't know what we actually want. And I know I've hit that many times, but it's like you said, I did this with my supplement company. I did it because I wanted to be in the fitness industry and I take supplements, and there's a bunch of reasons I did it. But at the end of the day, did I see that working with my life long term? No, which is why I'm exiting and selling right now. But right. I think that's so important that you need to figure out exactly what you want. And I don't think you need to compromise that for anybody. And I don't think it needs to be altruistic necessarily. Like, you can want things for yourself without being a dick. And so I think that you need to think about what those things are before you take another step forward. Yeah,
it's amazing how difficult it can be for all of us to really be honest about that. We feel like we have to present ourselves a certain way, and so that we're received a certain way and people maintain a certain image of us, or that, whatever weird filter we're putting on that future that we want. when in all reality, it's like when push comes to shove, it's like, no, I don't actually want that at all, or I hate doing that shit. And it's like, why are you going down that road? Or why are you like saying that is a core tenet of your, of why you're doing this? Like, come on. Like, just what is most important to you? What do you want this to look like for yourself when you die? What do you want people to say about you? What things do you want to have accomplished? And all these things. And it's so often that when you ask someone, like, what are your goals in business? It's just this, like, this mask gets put on, and they say the things they think they're supposed to say. But then when you take them through an exercise about, the bigger picture and all that, and we can try to pull it together, can try to find that honesty. But it's amazing that the disconnect oftentimes that I see between what they're doing and what they're saying they want versus when you really pull it out of them and tease it out, what actually comes out.
Yeah, I completely agree. And the place that road goes is not good, because when you don't know where you're driving, and then the other people don't know where you're driving either, and so they don't really know where they're supposed to be driving, everything is really hard. And to be honest with you, like, everybody listening to the show knows owning a business is really, really hard anyway. Like, the cards are already stacked against you. Mm-hmm. And so you're making it really hard on yourself. And what happens is, because you don't have a vision, because the other people don't know the vision, you end up putting so much effort in that you get 3, 4, 5 years down the road, you're kind of getting by, or maybe you're, barely getting by, your head's above water, but you just ask yourself, what the hell is all this for? Mm-hmm. Like, is this seriously what it means to own a business? And then you get frustrated. And I think that a lot of that can be alleviated when you know exactly what you're building. You can see when things aren't going exactly where you want to. And do I need to change my communication because they don't know? And that's important.
Awesome, man. Great advice. Where can people find more about you?
RickAlexander.com. And if you're interested in the book, you can go to burnyourcouch.com.
Awesome. And I know you've got a killer podcast, LionHeart Radio. People can check that out, www.lionheartrad.io. Check out LionHeart Radio on iTunes, and check out the book. I want to thank you, Rick, for being on the show. Great chatting with you, man. Thanks for sharing your knowledge. And everybody, thank you very much for tuning in again this week. Be sure to swing by on Facebook. Check out the network. It is our private Facebook group for the motivated gym owners of the world, where you can check the show out live and jump on and even do Q&A now and again. And obviously this is also going out to iTunes and Spotify and on YouTube. So please leave us a 5-star review, leave some comments, and Rick will be in the group as well. So if you have any questions for myself or for Rick on the subject or on the episode today, just go ahead and hit us up in the comments below, and we'll get back to you as soon as we can. Thank you very much for joining us again. And Rick, have a great weekend. We'll see everybody next week. Bye.
Perfect. You too.